Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to talk about how I've dealt with empathy, the problem of empathy, okay, and how I think that maybe other people with NPD might experiment in their program if they want to have a program, maybe to sort of deal with this issue of empathy and maybe develop whatever needs to be developed to deal with that problem. Okay, before I even start that, okay, I have to say, and I'm going to say it, okay. I don't think psychology has a fair presentation, okay, of the empathy question. Okay, I think even the term empathy, I think, is a very unfair term. Okay, and I don't think that's the best terminology to describe, let's say, the kind of deficits that a person has with NPD. Now, clinically, they may have a point. There may be people in the world, some with NPD and some without NPD. Okay, people who do, they're just not very emotional, and they don't really have a tremendous sensitivity to the emotions of other people. Okay, I don't deny that. Okay, but I actually do have a problem. Okay, with the idea that somehow you're super impaired if you don't have strength, if you're not really strong in feeling the feelings of other people, or being really tuned into the feelings of other people. I think that's a big mistake on psychology's part, and I think it just reflects that the subculture of psychology, that subculture, I think they have a tremendous emotionality bias. Okay, they're very biased towards affect, and I think that's because, in my opinion, they have an infantile bias. Okay, um, and I do think that there are stages in human development, and it may be true that in NPD, maybe we prematurely sort of get away from emotions. Maybe that's too premature, or maybe in some of us we're just not very emotional. I'm not really sure which is which. Okay, but and actually, before I say that, most NPDs that I know are very emotional in some way. Okay, maybe it's not traditional emotions, but there's a lot cooking inside of an NPD person. So very passionate in their own way. Okay, very very few NPDs are going to be really truly cool. They're kind of overheated. So affectively, I think there's a lot of brewing inside an NPD person, and I think we may discover that when too much is brewing inside of you, okay, it may be that you start to have a different affect, okay, and it may come across as sort of blunted, but really it's because you're cooking. Too much is cooking inside you. That may be true. Maybe in some cases there are some people that are truly blunted in the emotions, but I think, to be quite honest, I think we're putting a complex on people with cluster B and NPD. Now, it is true, okay, and I'll be the first to admit it, that when you get too preoccupied with your own basic concerns, and you get too preoccupied with your own immediate excitements and all that, you are going to have a reduced concern for others. Okay, but I didn't say empathy, I said concern. Okay, I like to use regular language. Okay, I don't like using fancy special language. This thing of empathy, that word is such a clinical, just not a very healthy. I don't think it's a very healthy word. I think for hundreds of years and for however many decades and decades before this buzzword empathy, got into the public pop culture. Okay, people were using terms like, "Does he care about other people?" "Do I care about other people? Am I concerned about other people?" Okay, those are terms we can work with. Okay, but this term of empathy, I think it goes a little too deep, and I think it really is part of like this vision, I think, that psychology has, that if you don't have this effective emotionality, that somehow you're just this inherently defective, not even human person. Okay. And frankly, I think even though they'll try to deny it, I think a lot of psychologists would say one of the foundations of being human is having this emotionality that I think they are not respecting, that a lot of people don't have that kind of emotionality. Okay. So, they're trying to pathologize something that, just because it's not what they experience. So that's my first concern. And I'm not shy. I don't like to be confrontational. I really don't like to be confrontational. But the fact is, I'm not shy about just letting it be known that, I'm not really comfortable with the way they frame the question of our special emotionality. I think really, I think the real problem with NPD is that when you get so preoccupied with your immediate concerns, okay, and you're not open to the general matters in the environment, including other people, okay, when you're just preoccupied with your immediate concern. And this happens with drug addicts as well. Okay, when you're just too preoccupied with your own addictive cycle or your own immediate concerns, you're obviously going to have a very reduced concern for others, okay, and for other things in your environment, okay. So I think it's really just a question of the focus of concern and sort of like a selective representation of, like, say, immediate concerns, and just getting caught up in immediate concerns. Okay, so I don't think we need to throw this whole emotionality thing in there. I think that's the red herring, I think, in this picture. Um, but we do need to focus on where we really do have a deficit. And I think our deficit is that we're just too preoccupied with our immediate concerns, and it doesn't allow us to have a horizon, a broader horizon of concern. Okay, so that, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. Part of it could be, just where we're just habituated. Okay, we're just habituated to be just too focused on our immediate concerns. The other thing is that we may tend not to have our lives in order. And when you don't have your life in order, you're always rushing and swimming to put out fires. Okay, so it could be a combination of just our habituation and also just the fact that we don't have our lives really well organized. So we're always kind of like putting out fires and dealing with drama that doesn't allow us to have a more extended vision. Okay, so obviously, I'm not going to focus so much on the emotionality because I think that's just frankly almost bullshit. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I think that's almost bullshit. I like to use regular terms like concern. Okay, concern, caring, and maybe even just like just understanding. Understanding. Okay, so let's just start with three terms: care, concern, understanding. Okay, now how would I apply that in my experience, and how have I done that? Okay, now I've already said in another video that the program that I have is basically turning myself over, okay, in certain areas. Okay, like, say, getting along with people, and also with anger management, and even, like, say, in the area where I have attitudes towards people. Okay, in all those areas, okay, I've decided as a way of life, because I believe in it, okay, that I'm just going to turn myself over to things that I've adopted as an adopted belief system. Okay, so it's not really me, and I'm not pretending it's me, and it's not an ideal self. It is just literally, I'm giving up. I'm checkmated, and I have all the vibe of being checkmated. Okay, I'm not even trying anymore. I know that this person here is not going to be able to get along with people, and this person here cannot manage anger and cannot manage his attitudes. So I've just turned myself over. Okay, I've given up. I'm checkmated, and I've turned myself over to an adopted belief system that I think is good for me. Okay, and basically, my adopted belief is that by assuming more of the environmental taxation. Okay, environmental taxation is taking on more of the frustrations and the unease that's in the environment. Okay, by taking on more unease in the environment, whether it's about other people, maybe things that I just don't think about, maybe political issues, just taking on more of what's in the environment, maybe doing a better job in my work, just being more conscientious, not just trying to get jobs done, but really thinking of all the issues, to make my work better. Okay, taking care of my clients, going the extra mile, and then, yeah, the people around me, my children, my family, my wife, the rest of my family, my mother, my brother and sister, all these people. Okay, taking on more of the environment, taking on more of the taxation in the environment. Taxation is just all the issues in the environment. Okay, just assuming more of a burden, okay, of all the issues that are in my environment already that I've sort of selectively, not taking on, just taking on more and learning to live with the unease as a way of life, and knowing that it's good medicine. It's like a good vitamin to have more unease in life, unease, okay, and that I will just metabolize that discomfort and that frustration and just all the weird feelings and all the turmoil that goes on with just taking on the environmental taxation. Okay, so this is really just a very simple term: environmental taxation. Take on more of the taxation that's already in the environment. Okay, and just take it on, and know that the pain and the discomfort of that is the only thing that allows my organic metabolism to just metabolize that and produce a real heart. Okay, and I just believe that. That's just a belief. It's not my own belief. I acquired that belief. That's a adopted belief. But I turned myself over to that. Okay, so now how does that help with the empathy? Okay, because a lot of the items in the environmental taxation, okay, are the concerns of other people, the factors that would be important to the other people. I'm not so much focusing. Notice, how would they feel? I mean, that's one item is how do they feel, okay? But also, how good would this be for them, or how do they, what is their opinion? Maybe not how they feel, but what's their opinion or what's their point of view, okay? Or how could this? I can even imagine, like, how could this affect other people? Very practical, but just taking on more concerns for everything in the environment, not just my immediate factors, okay? So, like, say a very simple thing, like, say let's say my wife is uncomfortable in the house we're living in because she'd rather live in a house that's closer to where her parents live, okay? And also maybe she's willing to pay more rent because she also just wants to live in a bigger house, okay? Now, the way I'm looking at it is we're trying to save to actually buy a house someday, okay? So why do we want to spend more rent? We're just going to save less money, and then it's like, oh, you don't like a small house. Why can't you just put up with living in a small house? So it's like, okay, obviously in the environment there's lots of different issues. Now, yeah, I will tend to prefer my own issues, okay? But I turn myself over. I'm not just going to be myself, okay? I just turn myself over, and as a way of life I assume a bigger plate of issues, okay? Taking in all the factors that are important to my wife, okay? I didn't get for 1 second into her feelings, okay? Even though I could, if I wanted to, I could also throw her feelings. She's going to be happier in a bigger house, okay, fine. But the bottom line is I could just take more on my plate. Okay, naturally, I'm not going to do that. Okay, but I've adopted a system where, or adopted a belief that I will turn myself over and I will just assume because it's good for me a bigger plate of issues. Okay, so the real factors, okay, is not the fact that yeah we can save more money in this house. Yeah, it's okay to have a small house because it's good for your character. But I'm also taking in that for other people it's important to be closer to their parents. Okay, and that it doesn't matter that we're going to pay a little more rent because she's willing maybe to maybe sacrifice more on groceries or whatever to sort of balance out the difference. And that even if we spend a little more money, we're going to be happier in the other house because she'll be happier. So, there are other factors on the table. So I'm not deciding whether she's right or I'm right. I'm just putting more on the table, putting more on the plate. Okay. And in general, that's called environmental taxation. Okay. Environmental taxation. So then I do that at work too. When I have clients, if my client, gives me a hard project, I could be thinking, oh, this is such a hard project. But then I think more, what more is on the table? He'd probably like to get this early. He'd probably like an extra page of analysis. He'd probably like me to go a little more in depth than what I normally go. Like, wouldn't it be good for this client to get extra value for what he's paying? Just all these extra items that I normally just don't have the trouble to think about because deep down inside here, I'm not going to think about those things. Okay, this is a practice. I've adopted a belief that it's good for me just to turn myself over and put more on my plate. Call it the grind. Get into the grind, but take on more environmental taxation and just believe that the discomfort of having more on your plate, more issues on the table, more uncomfortable dissonances on the table, that is actually a vitamin, okay, and that we will organically metabolize that, and it's actually good for us to be metabolizing all those things, okay? So I just believe that. And I do believe that it's good to have, let's say, kind of more of a load, more of a tax burden, an environmental tax burden. Okay, because I actually have come to believe that when you have more discomfort in your life and you really believe in it and you deliver yourself into it, you will metabolize that. Okay, and I think metabolizing discomfort at a let's say at a reasonable level, not too much, obviously, a reasonable level of discomfort, well, as we metabolize that, I think we grow something in ourselves that wouldn't be there. Okay, we start to synthesize dissonances in ways that we would never do before. Okay, we start to have a more balanced perspective. Okay, and we start to really take into consideration interests that are beyond our immediate interests. Okay, so our concern, okay, our understanding, and our consideration just starts to expand. Okay, and I think that is what was missing. That is compensating for what was missing in the original NPD. When you start with NPD, the diagnosis is low empathy, but what's really happening is you just don't have very expanded consideration. Okay, and so this is just expanding our consideration, appreciation, understanding beyond our immediate interest. Okay, and so this is something that it's not an emotionality thing. Okay, it's a practical way of living. Okay, and I think when you take the emotionality out of it, people feel more comfortable with you because there's nothing that turns off people more than when you start faking emotion. Okay, emotion, if you have it, is great. Okay, but when you start trying to like sort of fit into emotion and sort of present yourself as emotional, I think people get a weird vibe out of that. And even if they can't put their finger on it, I think subconsciously, I don't think it's very healthy to be putting that out there. Okay, so I don't worry about my emotions. Okay, whatever emotions I have, I'm going to have without having to worry about them. I don't think about my emotions. What I think about is expanding my environmental tax burden. Okay, and I take it on, and then I get the discomfort because it is uncomfortable, and then I just process that discomfort. And frankly, I think when we learn to live with sort of a chronic state of discomfort because of a burden, because of taking on the environmental tax burden, okay, I think that discomfort will metabolize into more of a heart. Okay, it may not be the lovey-dovey baby infantile emotionality that is the paradigm of psychology, but you may develop a real heart, and people can tell you have a heart. They can tell you care. Okay, and I think that maybe, again, let's be real careful. Okay, being, having good human emotions or a good human heart may not look like the way we think it's going to look. Okay, we expect it to be the typical hysterical baby infantile emotions, but maybe what it really looks like when you have a real heart that's really developed is basically, you're just quiet, but people can tell you care. Okay, people can tell you care. And frankly, I'm not going to analyze it any more than that because I'm convinced, and I'm sorry, I am convinced that the problem we have with NPD is not specifically an emotionality issue. It's specifically we're very limited in our scope of what we care about. Okay, and we need to. We're not going to look inside ourselves to fix that because we're not going to fix it from inside. But we turn ourselves over believing and adopting a belief system that we need to have more environmental taxation. Okay, and by taking on more environmental taxation, more unease, okay, we will metabolize that if we just let it be uncomfortable. Okay, and it will metabolize, and we will learn through experience that this does get metabolized, and we will develop, say, more synthesis, and we'll be able to better reconcile and deal with, let's say, conflicting and dissonant ideas. Okay, so there was a time when I couldn't, talk about, like, say, the war in Ukraine or war in Iraq or whatever, because I'd have my opinions and I have my opinions. But now, I'm actually, as a way of life, I'm taking on more of the issues, and I'm just letting them, not not trying to resolve them right away, and the same thing for relationships, for things in the family, for just conflicts, just whatever, local politics or whatever, just letting things be uncomfortable. Or let's say if I have a client that's giving me a hard time or giving me stuff, I feel like the client is being unfair, I just let it be. They give me an assignment that seems impossible, unreasonable, I don't try to have any opinion, I just feel uncomfortable. Okay, and I know that I will synthesize that, and by synthesizing that and by organically metabolizing that, I will eventually be in a better place. And voila, look, it's like magic. I end up getting all these projects done, and I end up doing, work that seems unfair and whatever, and things are just better, you know. And as far as like ideas, like political ideas, ideologies, let's say relationship issues, I'm just more integrated, okay, because I'm taking on more environmental burden, okay. And yeah, I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the organ in us, equivalent to like a liver or a kidney, that sort of metabolizes discomfort and metabolism. I think that is the dialectical aspect of the heart. I think that is poetically the heart that a lot of us are missing. Um, so that's how I deal with the empathy issue. And I think that, you can criticize me all day long about how deep my emotions are, how much I feel. You can question, and I don't care. I mean, I'm not worried about my emotions. I have whatever emotions I have, but I think what people around me would say, people who are close to me, people that are dear to me, I think they would say that I do care, because I do care. And I don't have to think of it as, I'm not pretending, and I'm not faking it, and it's not like a false self, and I'm not, like conning anybody. It's because I've taken on an acquired belief system that I should be taking on more, and I do process it, and I do care. So just the fact that it wouldn't come spontaneously from within me, well, whatever. I've turned myself over. Yeah, I've made that decision, and that's a life. That's a commitment, And so that commitment is part of me, and people are allowed to have acquired beliefs, And I do have acquired beliefs. It's not a false self. It's acquired beliefs, and it's a way of living that I've let's say I've committed myself to and delivered myself to. Now, do I have moments where I'm not at my best? Of course. I have moments where I'm not a good person, of course. But those are just moments, and it's the long game that matters, not specific moments. So sometimes you have to renew your commitments, and I try to renew my commitments probably several times a day because that's just part of what it means to have a commitment. You have to always be renewing it. So anyway, bottom line is that I would recommend to people just to experiment, maybe not focusing so much on the emotionality, you know, and just focus more on delivering yourself and turning yourself over to a belief system that expands the tax burden, the environmental tax burden that you're just willing to take on as a chronic unease, chronic discomfort. And I think as we settle into that and get used to that, I think it really grows a lot in us because we'll start metabolizing more of the complex molecules of experience that will grow the heart. So yeah, that's how I've dealt with empathy, and I hope this is helpful to somebody. So thanks for watching.